Hold on. Keep going. We're good?
No, I haven't started to work here yet.
Okay, good. Okay. You good? You good? All right. Welcome to our Family University series. Tonight we're going to be talking about support agencies and the different agencies that can provide support to your child who is deaf and hard of hearing or has other complications and other disabilities. Tonight for our speakers we have Laura Fink from Vocational Rehabilitation. We have Marilyn Call from the Sanderson Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We have Leslie Howell from the Division of Services for People with Disabilities. And we have Trina Ruche from Utah Schools for the Deaf. And they'll each take some time and talk to you about some of the services that they provide. So we'll start with Laura Fink. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And do we have my PowerPoint slide showing up, please? Okay. So as Adam mentioned, I'm with Vocational Rehabilitation.
I'm just concerned that the devs, whoever is watching on there, it will be blocking the interpreter.
It's not.
Can you see it clear? Okay.
All right. Thanks. I'm with Ogden Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. I'm a VR counselor, and I've been with the agency for just about 2 years now. And through my time, I've had lots of questions about voc rehab and the process, start to finish. And so I created a little handout that I provided for this evening, and for those of you to take a look at along with me from start to finish the voc rehab process. And so we'll go through step by step on each area of this. The first step is orientation, and what that is an opportunity for individuals who are interested in voc rehab services to come into their local office and watch the orientation welcome video. It's also available online from our website at utah.gov, and so you're welcome to view it at your own leisure, or you can come in to your local office to watch it. With transition services, it's a little bit different, specifically for students. You'll have a counselor assigned to the school to be able to come out to the school to provide the orientation as another opportunity for the students. At orientation, you're able to pick up an application, fill it all out, and set up your appointment with your counselor. The receptionist from the office will provide you with an initial interview appointment with your counselor, and it's important to bring your application with you and any other additional documentation you're able to provide. So you have that first meeting with them, you get to know your counselor, they get to know you, and from the first meeting, federal regulations allow the counselor 60 days to gather other supporting evidence to determine whether or not the applicant is eligible for VR services. And so there will be a letter sent to the applicant's home address letting them know one way or the other if they're eligible for services. If they are assumed eligible for services, that's an opportunity to come back and meet with your counselor again and start discussing, brainstorming, and planning the services that you need to address your barriers to employment. And so that includes maybe career interest testing, where you can find out what sounds cool and also what you're good at, and how that looks in the real world of work. What are their job openings for out there right now? So that's an opportunity to work collaboratively together with your counselor on your plan. It's your life, and so it's your plan and your involvement's necessary. Once an ideal situation has been identified, a VR plan, IPE, Individualized Plan for Employment, is set in place. That's a contract agreement between the counselor and the client as to the services that are going to be provided and who's responsible for doing what. So it's important that you know your rights and responsibilities under that VR plan. Sometimes that includes services for attending a training program. Sometimes that doesn't. It's all very, very individualized and up for discussion and negotiation with the counselor. The ultimate goal being employment. That's what Voc Rehab is all about, is finding employment that's appropriate on an individual basis. And so once the client starts working, Voc Rehab starts the 90-day countdown clock. Voc Rehab is intended to be a short-term service provider, and so once the job starts, 90 days starts the wrap-up period for Voc Rehab to ultimately step out of the picture. During those 90 days is the most important time to be sure to follow up with the counselor. If there are any things that are concerns that are coming up on the job, it's an important thing to notify the counselor about immediately. If they don't know, they can't help fix it. And so there is an opportunity for post-employment services after the case has been closed. If something comes up on the job later on down the road, you're always welcome to get back in contact with Voc Rehab and specifically your counselor to see if there's something that they can help you out with on the job to help you maintain it. As I said, 90 days begins this countdown. There's a little bit of a reminder in between the 90-day and the 0-day. And again, communication is key. If the counselor doesn't know, they can't help. Once we're down to 0 days, that means the counselor's wrapping up the paperwork and the things, and they close the case out of the system, and you are successfully independent and on your own. And that's the Voc Rehab goal. And if there are any questions about this, I'd like to take one. Trina?
Yes, I guess my question is not towards work. It would be towards college or a Voc Rehab school. Where does Voc Rehab play? What does Voc Rehab play in that part? If they were going to go to college or they were going to go to a trade school before getting a job, how does Voc Rehab play into that?
Great question, thank you. Training is an option for VR services. Individuals who are on path towards training, going to a college or a vocational school, like the assistive technology colleges that are local, that's looked at upon as an individual basis. Voc Rehab can support somebody going to those schools as long as comparable resources have been sought out first. Something like the Pell Grant or other financial aid options, that's what's looked into or tapped into before Voc Rehab is able to assist financially. But as far as supporting somebody in furthering their education and higher education and training, Voc Rehab doesn't look down upon that. It's just some cases Voc Rehab can financially contribute. But again, it's very individualized, case-by-case basis, and always something for discussion with the counselor. Good question, thank you. Any others? All right, that's my presentation. Adam, turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Laura. All right, thanks, Laura. Next, we'll hear from Marilyn Call from the Sanderson Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. She's going to come and talk to us now.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Call, and I am the director of the division. How many of you have heard about the Sanderson Center? Yay, some of you visited us, yes. You know, deaf people many years ago that grew up in the School for the Deaf, when they graduated, they really missed having a gathering place and a place where they could have classes and caption movies and where they could play their sports. And luckily they had learned a lot in school, and they learned how to lobby. They learned the process of how to go to the legislature. And they did that starting in the 1960s, trying to get a community center for adults who were deaf. And eventually they were successful, and that is why we have the Sanderson Center in Taylorsville today, and we also have a smaller deaf center in St. George, and then we have outreach people throughout the state. So, you know, I don't have a clue what my handouts, my PowerPoints are supposed to do, but I'll have to look at them. We gave this presentation. Okay. So, before I get into talking more about the Sanderson Center, where I've worked for 22 years, I think that I was really picked to become a part of this transition team of people with Adam and with Trina and with Wade and Kelly. I think, great, okay, thank you, Adam. He always takes care of new technology. Anyway, I think one of the reasons I was picked to be on that team is because I have raised 2 deaf children, and I have lived to tell about it. And so since we're talking to both students and moms, I want to talk just a little bit about that first. You know, it's like when our children are born and we find out they're deaf or we find out they have other disabilities, we are so focused on getting them to learn to talk, learn to sign, learn to walk, getting them into the right school, and it seems like just like that, all of a sudden, they're grown up, and school is going to be finishing, and it's a really scary time to think about what is my son or daughter going to do when they're out of school, because the school is such a it's such an important part of their lives, and usually an important part of the parents' life too. My oldest daughter, Ashley, was deaf, and she also had autism, and so she needed a variety of services. She was very smart, and she could sign, and she could memorize words, and her behavior was just awful. And she was one of the first groups that lived in the cottages up here when this school was brand new. And then she would go to Enable Industries and learn things. And she really liked that, but her favorite thing to do was when she was done with her job at Enable Industries, she was matched with someone who had a lot more sense than her. It was a nice, deaf young man who had cerebral palsy. And her favorite thing was to knock him over so he couldn't stop her. And then she would get on one of the UTA buses to come to Salt Lake, and she would joyride and joyride. And it was as we were trying to get her to have more independence, it became very scary. And we'd get a call from the school, and they'd go, we just found out Ashley's on bus. They wouldn't usually even know which bus to Salt Lake City. And then luckily we had an in with UTA, and they would dispatch all of their drivers and find out eventually which bus Ashley was on, and they would stop somewhere and meet us. But other times she would just get off in downtown Salt Lake and walk all over. And so I know, like some parents, you think, yes, we've got to raise our children to be independent, but it's also can be very, very scary. My other daughter, Camille, was just your typical deaf student and had her sights on going to college. And not very many parents knew about vocational rehabilitation. And it was fortunate for me that I work at the Sanderson Center, and our program, Division of Center Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, is under the Department of Rehabilitation. So I knew about rehabilitation, vocational rehabilitation services, was able to tell some of the families that my daughter hung out with that, you know, if these kids did good in school and wanted to go to college, there was help for them with their tuition and books, but they had to be doing really good in high school so that they could get into the college they wanted. So there's like issues when your child is just deaf, and there's issues when they're deaf and have other problems, and they're all different. But the good news is there's a lot of experienced people along the way that can help. So when my kids were approaching getting out of, my two kids were approaching the end of their high school years, I was able to put Ashley in a program similar to what a lot of you students are in up here, where she could learn more independence skills. And then when she turned 21, again, I knew about vocational rehabilitation, and so that was our first stop, you know, for Ashley to have to get trained to have a job. And since she wasn't going to be going to college or a university, she had that 90 days. And Ashley was smart, but there is no way she was going to be independent enough to have a job identified, find someone that would actually take her into their place of employment, and that she would be independent enough to do the job by the time 90 days were over. But fortunately, someone had told me 10 years prior that she would also be eligible for services from the Division of Services for People with Disabilities, or DSPD, and Ashley was on a waiting list for services for them for 10 years. And sometimes, you know, they called and said her name has come up to the top, and I'd say, we don't need anything right now, but please keep her right at the top. So when she did graduate from school, she went with VR, and there were some deaf specialist programs, and within the first month, they had identified a job for her. And she worked for Harmon Music Group, and she did a lot of the work on the motherboards that go inside their musical components. And they found it just a perfect job for her as an autistic person. She could do it better than any other person in the world, and most people who weren't autistic did not like it. It was very boring, but for her it was wonderful. So when the 90 days were done, she was able to get a job coach through DSPD and just continue on in that job. And unfortunately, when she was age 29, she died. But work and her friends at work and that routine had become one of the most important things in her life. And she looked forward to going to work every day, and when she died, she had a 401k and a life insurance policy paid for by her place of work. And many, many people that didn't know any sign language at all had grown to love her and came to her funeral. I thought it was pretty amazing that if a child like Ashley could get a job with support and have that kind of a regimented life and a real enjoyable life, that if she could do that, anyone could do that if you have the right supports. So if any of you parents are watching and your child has extra disabilities and they would qualify for DSPD, put them on the waiting list pronto so that they can have some supports when they're adults. Okay, then my other daughter, Camille, it was just like clockwork. You know, they got out of school supported by USDB, and she and many of her friends just then went up to USU. 4 years later, she graduated from USU, and then she went on an LDS mission, and then she actually got hired by the School for the Deaf as a sign language teacher, and she loved her job here. So that's kind of, I think, two really good success stories. It's very important for parents to be involved all along the way and listen to the teachers, and especially when you're in the higher grades, you've got to know when to start letting go and to start building independence and letting your child, son or daughter, make their own decisions. Another thing I found really important was that you don't just wait to work until after you're done and you're in college, because I know with Camille and many of her friends, they had to work while they were at college to pay for their housing. And so jobs from the age of 14, 15, 16, if you can start developing work there, that's very important. Sometimes at the Sanderson Center in Salt Lake, we get calls saying, is there anyone that could tutor my child in math or tutor them in ASL, or I'm a working mom and I have a deaf child. Do you know anyone that could babysit my child during the summer? And what's more perfect? I mean, my daughter did that all summer once, tending a 6-year-old deaf child when she was in high school, and it was just a really good thing. So there are jobs out there for deaf people, and it's a really good way to start developing job skills when you're young. Also at the Sanderson Center, at our division we have 27 full-time employees and maybe another 50 part-time employees, and majority of them are deaf or hard of hearing. About the only ones that are hearing are a few secretaries and then the interpreters. We make the interpreters here. But we always try to hire deaf or hard of hearing people first. So now I'll go on and say a little bit more about what services are available at the center, if I can find my water. Oh, it's down there. Okay. Make sure we can see the interpreter. Okay, so when you're an adult, you don't all of a sudden know everything and know how to be in contact with all of the services that are available, or how to rent an apartment, how to apply for low-income housing if you're low income. And so there are a lot of supports we still do at the center, which are one-on-one types of things, counseling, case management. We also have someone who's not a VR counselor that helps people find or keep their jobs. We have assistive technology that you can try out it in your home or borrow. We also, in our program, we have the responsibility to certify all of the interpreters who work in the state of Utah. And that's a really big program. So see this guy here? He had to take a lot of really scary tests to become a certified interpreter in Utah. And we're the ones that develop those scary tests and make sure they're certified. Do any of you, do all of you know what case management means? We have like 3 case managers in Salt Lake and 1 in St. George. And the kind of things that they do is help people if they get a legal letter from someone, and most people can't understand legal letters. We'll get with the legal center and get on the phone with them and help them understand that. We'll help with if your apartment's kicking you out because they don't believe that you should have a dog and your dog is an officially trained hearing dog. We'll help with that. We help a lot of people understand the benefits that they're entitled to. And some people that are getting SSI and want to work and make more money. We have someone who specifically focuses on benefits planning and can tell you all of the benefits for going back to work and work closely with your VR counselor. And we also do a lot of fun things too, a lot of camps, a lot of leadership programs, things like that. So please come visit us sometimes. I'm going to leave some brochures up here. And even if for you parents who are listening, just to get your son or daughter used to going there to meet other deaf friends, because we have the sports programs for the School for the Deaf, where kids come from USDB, but also from a lot of mainstream programs, and play volleyball and basketball and just do a lot of fun social things. So it's a great place to hang out. Go on to the next thing here. One thing that we can do is we can connect a lot of people. Okay, they know about USDB, then they find out about the Sanderson Center, and they might know about DSPD, but they might not know about other programs, like the fact that you can get a free phone or a free iPad if you are low income. I don't think they're right online with the iPads yet, that you can get, if you have low income, you can get a free smartphone that is checked out to you, that's yours for communication purposes. And also there's independent living, we have a bookstore, and we have relationships with all of the other agencies in the state and can help with that. So what could the case manager do for you that is just when you're just coming out of high school? We talked about the benefits planning. If parents are having a hard time letting their son or daughter be independent, we have counselors who you can come talk to. Bring mom and dad, and they can maybe help work out something so that you can show mom and dad that you can be independent and that it is time maybe to start backing off a little so that you can learn the skills you need to learn. Or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe your mom and dad want you to be independent and you don't feel like you want to. So we've got family counselors that can help you talk through some of those things. And if you don't want to go through VR for job training, you have someone and you already have a job that you've identified, but you're having trouble getting hired, we have someone that can help you write your resume better and help you know what accommodations you will need. And then also if you're trying to find an apartment and figure out how you're going to pay for it, our case managers are expert in the housing laws, so they can help you with that. So please look at us as a resource for adults. And are there any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mira. Okay, next we're going to hear from Leslie Howell from DSPD, Department or Division of Services for People with Disabilities.
Hi, I'm Leslie Howell. I work for the Division of Services for People with Disabilities. That is a division within the Department of Human Services and the state of Utah. We serve approximately 5,000 people in community-based programs across the state of Utah. We serve another 200 individuals at USDC, which is the Utah State Developmental Center. The information that I present today is all available on our website, which is dspd@utah.gov. There's also a very helpful guidebook on that has been written by parents and the Parent Center. It's easy to understand and would answer a lot of the questions you might have about eligibility and the programs. Eligibility for services in our division are basically within 3 programs. An individual needs a qualifying diagnosis, and the first program is our community-based service waiver. It's for individuals that have intellectual disabilities and related conditions such as cerebral palsy, autism, seizure disorder, that sort of thing. They will require the same service needs as an individual with intellectual disabilities. The second one is an acquired brain injury. That's also a waiver that the division administers. And the third one is a physical disabilities services. The eligibility criteria for the home and community-based waiver, there are basically 7 areas that you need to have qualify in 3 areas. Those would be self-care, self-direction, mobility, learning, expressive and receptive language, the capacity for independent living, or the capacity for economic self-sufficiency. There's other criteria with the brain injury waiver, and I don't know those as well. All of this information is on the website. So what is the process? What you think, if you're eligible, it is to contact our centralized intake phone system now, which is in Salt Lake. I have the phone number, but if, I have some information too that I can leave concerning eligibility. The intake number is 1-877-568-0084. If you call, you will reach an intake worker. They will send an eligibility packet, and there will be a checklist of all the documents that are needed to return back to the intake worker. If you are found eligible for services, then an intake worker will come to your home and do what's known as a needs assessment. A needs assessment kind of identifies the needs as far as the family. It can have factors like the caregiver's health, the severity of the disability, all of those factors like the time on the waiting list, all of those affect the score, which is on the critical needs assessment. That places you on the waiting list. That changes with the number of people coming in and their scores, but it still is on the waiting list. The waiting list, I'm sorry, there is one. They didn't used to be. But we have approximately 2,000 people right now on the waiting list. I don't think that is accurate because I think some people are discouraged about filling out those papers and they being put on a list. But I can give you several reasons why I think I would do that. One is we have some more programs that we are offering for individuals that are on the waiting list that the legislators advocate or approved funding for, such as one-time respite. The individuals last year that were chosen, there were like 250, and they received $5,000 worth of one-time respite. I know that isn't a lot, but it can help out for those people waiting. You're not removed from the waiting list. You still remain on the waiting list, and it doesn't affect your services. That's been increased this year. I think it will be approximately 1,000 people, and at least it's something to help for the people that are waiting for funding. Our funding is dependent on the legislative session. The legislators approve funding for our division. On our waivers, we match that money so that we can make it stretch as far as we can. But basically, if we don't have the funding, we can't bring more people into services. It used to be that we used only those critical needs scores to take someone into services. We don't do that now. We use 85% of those funds to bring the most critical of the individuals into services, but we still have 15% that we are now bringing people that are waiting for respite only, which is good. There's also some other pilot programs that are helping people on the wait list, such as the autism pilot, and there is a service broker pilot and a supported employment pilot. So I think I would get on the waiting list. Regardless, you need to be on the waiting list to be accepted into services. It would give me some satisfaction if I was a parent and I would know that if something happened to me, that the needs of my individual or family would raise higher on that priority and they would be accepted into services. So that's why I would definitely encourage you to do that. And also, when they approach the legislative session, they present them with these numbers saying there's 2,000 people waiting. If they have 5,000 people waiting for services, people would listen. And that's the only way we get an increase in funding is just by advocates such as yourself. So if you are found eligible for services, then you will need to choose a support coordinator. They're the same about as our case managers. You meet with them and your family and determine what services that you need. The support coordinator is a pivotal point, basically, in deciding what your services are. They're basically like a physician that prescribes a plan of care. And so when it's important that you choose someone that you like. There's probably about 50 support coordinator companies, approximately 200 different support coordinators. There's a process in choosing one, but it's important that you find the right one. Then you meet and you decide what services that you would like. There's a lot of services that are provided through our division. Basically, they're in 3 different areas. One is in family support or supports that go into the home. The second is day programming or day supervision for individuals. And the third is residential programming. So with the in-home supports, there's respite care where an individual can go in and provide just a break for the caregiver of an individual with disabilities. There's family support, in which there's trained individuals that go in and just help support the family so they can keep the child at home. We have professional parent, which is an out-of-home placement in a trained family where the child goes into a family setting and receives services there. For day programs, we have, you're all familiar, or maybe, with Enable, some of the larger day training programs. There is supported employment and work, and enclaves where you go out as a group and can work. With your signing skills, I would think that you might apply to work, even if you're going on to college or whatever, at one of the programs that we contract with. There are a lot of agencies in the state of Utah, and there are a lot of people that work for them. So, and not many, I bet you, that sign here as well. So that might be an option. In our residential programs, we have host homes, which are homes that are with the families trained to provide a residential home setting for an adult. We have supported living services in which we provide services to come in and teach the skills that that individual would need. That can be something like budgeting, cooking, going out in the community, picking up your groceries, transportation, that sort of thing, to help that individual only according to how much he needs. We have residential rehabilitation services that can be up to 24 hours a day. Most of the individuals we work with in the community live in apartments with 2 or 3 people. There really aren't many group home settings. That is in the past. So most of our folks live in apartments with roommates. That's because a lot of them are living on SSI and have limited income, so they share the rent and the utilities. Our services are for life. Once you're in, you're long term. We work with all of these other agencies, which is wonderful. We work with rehab services or division rehabilitation services to develop jobs as long as they can help with that area. We try and work with the Sanderson Center for some assistive technology. We do provide some assistive technology services. I think that there are more services that we provide, like behavior supports, after-school programs, summer programs for youth, that sort of thing, once you're eligible for services. The big thing to do is to call the intake worker, she said, and get started on the intake process. I wouldn't hesitate to check back to make sure that they had all my material and have received it. And then be on the waiting list, and maybe someday they'll fund a large proportion of that. We don't know. We can only hope. So do you have any questions for me?
My question is, you talked about apartments that they can live like 3 or 4 people. Are those supervised at all?
Yes, they can be in our rehabilitation, residential rehabilitation services. Those can be supervised up to 24 hours a day. We have individuals with autism that have severe disabilities that require 24-hour supervision. That includes night staff. That includes sometimes more than 1-to-1 supervision. Usually it's 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, but always night supervision. And then we have some homes where they live, and we just have supported living come in and just help them with the services that they do. So we go full scale.
Leslie, you talked about the ways you can the ways that you can qualify for services with the SBD. You mentioned communication limitations. Does that mean that a deaf individual could, if they were just deaf and didn't have deaf plus multi limitations, would they be able to qualify?
No, no. Our services would have to have a primary diagnosis of intellectual disability or a related condition. Part of those qualifications would be receptive and expressive language, but just the diagnosis of just having a hearing impairment or a speech impairment would not qualify you for services. That doesn't mean that some of our folks don't have some hearing impairment or loss of sight. It just means that they have a lot of other disabilities. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. The next and last presenter that we'll have is Trina Rouchet, the Associate Superintendent for Utah Schools for the Deaf. Thank you.
Okay. I'm so glad to be here tonight to share the programs and the services that we have at the Utah School for the Deaf. Our services, we are a legislated line item, and so we are funded through the legislation 100%. And we have the responsibility to serve deaf and hard of hearing children from birth to 22. And so our kids start in our PIP program, our Parent Infant Program, as soon as they've been diagnosed with a hearing loss. There's several ways that they're referred. They can be referred by a medical doctor. They can be referred by one of the early intervention programs out there, which those are located throughout the state. And then, so if they're referred to the Early Intervention Center, the Early Intervention Center has 24 hours to make a referral to us. And if we get the referral from a medical doctor, an audiologist, we have 24 hours to notify the Early Intervention Center because we share those children. We get part of our funding through Baby Watch for our babies birth to 3. And so that's how you start in the program. Getting our services would be from birth to 3. And then we have a transition part from Part C to Part B. Anyway, going from home services into school services. So students start at the school at age 3, and they go through their local education agency. So wherever you live, whatever district that you live in, they would call an individual education plan meeting, which is an IEP. When you're in birth to 3, you have an individual family plan, an IFSP. So it kind of changes when you come into school to an IEP. Same thing, only we focus more on the student rather than the family. In the birth to 3, we focus on the family and the child. So we're serving everyone. In the birth to 3, some of the services that we provide, we have a parent advisor, a PIP advisor that comes into the home and provides services according to whatever the IFSP says. Sometimes it's weekly services, sometimes it's every other week, and sometimes it's only once a month. We really customize that to not only the child's needs, but also to the family's requests. Some families are just very overwhelmed with a lot of people coming into their home. As part of that service, we have deaf mentors who are deaf adults that use American Sign Language, and they come into the home and they help teach the families how to sign and communicate with their child. They help facilitate communication with that child. And they introduce them into the deaf culture the deaf community. They take them to deaf activities at the Sanderson Center. Many times it's there. Sometimes it is here at the deaf school in Ogden. Sometimes it is at our campus in Salt Lake at JMS. But nonetheless, they try to get them involved in the deaf community for support so that they can meet people, learn the language, and really be empowered as families. So when they enter school, then that's kind of a life educational career for your child. And we really work on trying to help parents become their child's advocate when they enter school at age 3. Our preschool teachers work really hard in helping parents become empowered and educated on what their child's needs are in education so that they can be their advocates, because parents, you are the ones that are going to be the long haul with your child. A teacher will come and go, but a parent stays forever. So we really want to empower you, and that's what we try to do here at the Utah School for the Deaf. So your child goes through their career, and when they reach 16, we do a transition plan. That transition plan, we start looking at their future. What do you want for your child? What kind of employment? Do you want them to go to college? Are they capable of going to college? Or would a trade school be better? Or are they just going to go on the career path of getting a job? All those things come at about age 16. We start trying to get parents ready at about 14. We start talking about that at the IEP so that you're not blindsided. And we encourage you to talk to us about things that your child would need. So when we write that transition plan, then we start putting in employment. We start putting in education as far as, what are your goals and aspirations? What is your child? We interview your child. What does your child want to do when they graduate? What is it they want to do? We, quite frankly, don't accept that they want to sit on mom and dad's couch and eat potato chips and drink pop and watch TV. That isn't our goal for your child, and I'm sure if I know parents, that isn't any of your goals for your children. You want them to be independent, contributing citizens. And so we start at that time to encourage that. And then when it comes, usually the junior year of your child's career in education, we really start talking about, do you want your child to graduate in their senior year, and then they'll just graduate from USDB's program and move on to college? Or do you want them to stay with us and get some residential independent life skills, learn how to live independently, learn how to cook for themselves, learn how to get to and from work, to and from school, how to get into the community? All of that is part of our 18 to 22 program, which is our transition post-high school steps program. So that program, when your child moves into that program, then they would stay with us until 22 if they wanted to. Part of the things that we provide in that program is they do live on campus. They are in a cottage. It is a family setting with other students. So they live in a cottage setting, a home setting, where they have responsibilities of doing their own laundry, participating in meal planning, participating in meal preparation, shopping for food, setting up what we're going to do for activities. All of those types of things we have in that program. And then when they have checked off with, is it 80%? 75? 80%? 70% accuracy that they can do these things independently, then we have 2 cottages that we have set up as our independent life skills cottages. And those kids would transition into those cottages either by themselves or with a roommate. It depends on how many kids are ready to transition into that independent setting. It's a simulation apartment where they have to in order to be able to go into that program, they do have to have a job. and we help our kids get jobs around the community here. And a percentage of their salary goes to pay for them to live in this independent life skills apartment. And that includes their utilities, their water, their gas, everything is included in that rent. So that they get, and it's very minimal, but we just came to really believe that if children didn't have the opportunity to be paying something to live somewhere, then when they leave us, we haven't prepared them of what it's going to be like to have to pay to live somewhere. And they would be very shocked. So we do budget planning with them. We talk about that. We take them out to shop. We take them out to do leisure activities. They plan once a year a class trip. They plan the trip. They raise the money for the trip. They do fundraisers. They just got back from a trip. They went on the Western states? Northwestern states. They went to Idaho. They went to Washington State. They went to Oregon. And then they went across to Canada. So they had to have the experience of getting their own passport and everything that they needed to do to get ready to do that. And all along the way, this trip was to teach our children about how to get a job, what jobs were out there. So all along the way, we made stops. They went through the Boeing plant, and it was quite an eye-opening experience because that is a city within a city. And so they went there. They went to Sierra Pacifica, and they went to a farm where they actually got to go out and milk cows and talk to the farmers about how they, get their land prepared to plant. And they talked about all the big machinery and all the equipment. And it was just a very wonderful experience for our students. Last year, we stayed in-state, and they went down to all the canyonlands in the south and camped and had an enjoyable time there. The year before that, they earned all the money to go to Disneyland. So we've only been doing this for 3 years, but our kids, 4 years. And then 1 year we stayed in the Salt Lake City area that was just a 3-day, where they went down actually right here in the community and went to different businesses and went on tour and had that first-hand experience about real jobs that are right here in Utah, downtown Salt Lake, where you live, and so they would know how to seek employment. So those are some of the programs that we have available here at the Utah School for the Deaf, and we just really encourage families that are out, especially in the rural areas. If you've got a child that you feel is out there isolated, without any friends or socialization, and they're getting to that age of high school, junior high, high school, please contact us, because we would love for you to come up, stay a night, go on a tour of our facility, let us tell you and show you what we do, and really let you choose and see and make an educated decision about the future of your kids, because we want to help lead to that role of success. So, any questions? Okay, thank you so much. Oh, one other thing before I stop. I better do this. I got to do this plug. We also have this summer, we have our Mountain States Education Summit. It's for educational interpreters, educators of the deaf, parents, and students. It'll be June 23rd through the 25th. It'll be here at this campus. And it's all about technology. So we have a lot of workshops, breakout sessions that you can go to and learn how to use technology, iPads, phones, anything that you would need in your home that would be deaf specific. We have all that stuff that we will be hands-on opportunities to do. And so I have some flyers here for those of you who are here, and it'll also be posted on our USDB website, which is usdb.org. So it will be there for you to look at, and registration will be opening here next week. And then I have some brochures as well on our ASL English bilingual programs and our listening and spoken language programs throughout the school years. So thank you and have a good night.
We'd like to thank Trina and Leslie, Marilyn, and Laura for coming and sharing with us their different agencies and what they have to offer you. We hope that tonight has been informative and helpful to all the families out there. Please look forward to our next installment on Family University series. It will be towards the end of the summer, either August or September. And again, we're on YouTube at Family University series, so check us out there. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and we hope that you have good future with your family and deafness.